Good evening, saints, sinners, believers, unbelievers, whosoever will. Welcome to the Alpha Ministries podcast. Tonight we have a continuation of the Hurten Family. Pam Herman is our teacher and presenter, and she's going to go through, she's going to review, and then she's going to go through the rest of the family members that you have not met yet. So get ready. You're in for a fantastic treat. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening. Welcome to Family Matters. This will be the final class and continues to star our Hurten family. When I started this class, I introduced some terms that were basic to understanding this teaching. And I'd like to review those for anybody that's new real quickly. First of all, for the sake of this class, we are three-part beings, body, soul, and spirit. And each one of those arenas of life have primary needs that must be met for that life to continue and thrive. The primary need of the human soul is for personal worth. That need for personal worth was designed by God to be met by Him. However, when we do not have a personal relationship with God, we move out into the world to try and get our needs met. In those attempts, we come up with two primary roles that are played. For the sake of this class, those two primary roles are known as the fixee and the fixor. The fixee is what is typically known in codependency therapy as the victimizor. This is the person who is the aggressor in drug and alcohol teachings. This will be the one that is the alcoholic or the addict. In trauma and abuse, this will be the abuser. The fixor is the classic codependent enabler. This is the one who covers and takes care of and makes possible the behavior of the fixee. I've chosen to use these names because it is my experience in working in these families that both people are victims and both people are victimizers. There is no such thing as a one-way street in in the dysfunctional Hurten families. When we do not have our need for worth met, we move out into the world looking for people, places, and things that will fill that empty place on the inside of us. I call that empty place the black hole. I choose to call it the black hole because of the term black hole in science. A black hole in science, as best as I understand it, is a place they don't really understand what it is, but it sucks everything that comes within the gravitational force inside, trying to fill the emptiness. That is what we do when we move out into the world. When we attach to people, we develop what we call soul ties. Soul ties are not necessarily negative. They're usually taught as negative, but for the sake of this class, they are not negative. Soul ties were actually designed by God because His plan was that our soul would be tied to Him. However, when our soul, which is made up of our mind, our will, and our emotions, is not tied to Him, our soul ties to whatever we hope will meet that need for personal worth. Always, always remember that this is a need. This is not just a want. This is something that we must have for our soul to survive and thrive. These soul ties are not necessarily negative. They are either healthy or unhealthy. It is possible to have healthy soul ties. But in the Hurten family, we have unhealthy soul ties, where the members of the family manipulate and control each other, trying to get their need for worth met. In order to play this situation out, both parties are desperate. Remember that worth is like our air supply to our soul. We must have it. And so it begin to engage in what we call denial or lying to ourselves. We will start with simple denial, which is just saying what appears to be true just isn't true. But over time, as the situation becomes more and more dysfunctional, that flat out simple denial becomes less and less possible, and we have to get more creative. We have an entire world of rationalizations, justifications, and blaming that goes on to keep this system in place. Because nobody would really put up with what's really going on. We have to lie to ourselves and pretend that it is something that it isn't. In the dysfunctional family, we have a system, and that system facilitates the denial of each member of the family. As the attempts to get our need met continually fail, that results in what I call death emotions. Death emotions are what, not simply negative. Negative emotions are normal human reactions to situations that are not good. But death emotions come when we have our worth attached to a circumstance and it is failing us. The fix E is in a pattern of anger and resentment. And the fix or walks out a pattern of anxiety and worry. Self-pity is a state of being for both personalities. The fixor has resentment patterns. These resentment patterns include repressing angry feelings, feeling safer with this is a fixie. They get angry and they leave before they can be rejected. The fixie will believe they really don't even have any fear. This is not just a denial. This is a emotion that gets repressed before it's even felt. And it is substituted with anger. The fixie will scorn and devalue timid and fearful people, making themselves out to be superior and stronger than them. They believe that people make them feel angry, and they punish people. They get even, they act hostile, and maybe even given to violent temper outbursts. They have been shamed, and they shame themselves for feeling fear. They become angry if others do not do enough for them or what is being done isn't effective. They feel safer with their anger than with hurt feelings, and they wonder if they will ever not be angry. Fixor The fixor is given to anxiety patterns, or let me put it in a term that we're more familiar with, worry. The fixor is given to worry and anxiety. They repress their angry feelings and feel guilty. In fact, they believe they're not angry at anyone. They're just afraid and worried. They feel safer with their fear than angry feelings. They are terrified of rejection and abandonment and being alone. The fixer feels afraid if they believe they are the cause of someone else's anger. And they believe that people will go away. They will be left and abandoned if anger enters the picture. So they spend all their time trying to make sure that the fixee doesn't get angry. They feel controlled by other people's anger. They have been shamed and shame themselves if they feel angry. They feel anxious when their help is not effective, and they wonder if they will ever stop feeling fearful and anxious. Self pity. Self pity is the result of how our circumstances are impacting our worth as a person. They are not the result of the circumstance itself. There is no process for resolving self pity, only a change in our belief system regarding the source of our personal worth will resolve this issue. Self pity is rooted in shame. Shame is the only emotion that attacks the self. It attacks what I am. Shame is the belief that there is something wrong with me and I am worthless. Shame affects all the arenas of life, but it comes from the soul's need for worth. The primary feeling that someone may experience as this is going on is anxiety, or what I call dis-ease. And that dis-ease is the feeling of that empty place in our soul. This results in feelings of inadequacy and being unlovable. It prevents us from enjoying and achieving success. Shame destroys self-confidence. So we wear a mask, believing somewhere deep inside that if anybody really knew me, they would see and know how worthless I really am. The Hurten children. Last week, we talked about Martha the doer and Daryl the hero child. This week, I'm going to introduce 4 more of the Hurten children family. These roles that are played out in the family, once again, are not exclusive. The purpose of this teaching is to help you identify the role, first of all, that you played in the family growing up, and then the role that your siblings played in the family growing up. As I work through this process for myself and with my family, this is not about guilt. This is about compassion and understanding. That once I understood that the worth was a need that had to be met, that parents who do not have their need for worth met by God will begin the process of trying to get their worth met through each other and then through their children. The children will fall into a variety of roles. These roles are fluid, they may change over time. Excuse me. But the goal of this teaching is to help you identify what I call your MO, your method of operation. This is going to be the role that you are most comfortable in. This is the role that is going to be what is called ego-syntonic. It's in sync with your personality and your self-image. So as we go through the Hurten children, our first child is the scapegoat child. There is usually one child whose name spells trouble. This child senses that they cannot live up to or compete with the doer or the hero child, so they don't even try. Their attitude is that rules are made to be broken and are always at odds with authority. Rebellion is the fear of being controlled, and this child rebels against everything. They are likely to experiment with drugs and alcohol at a young age, and these behaviors allow them to be used as the scapegoat for the family. Billy is the scapegoat child in the Hurten family. Billy is hostile and defiant, always in trouble, immature and irresponsible, peer oriented, self sabotaging, and the focus of others' blame and anger. Billy has become the family scapegoat. He draws attention away from Henry and becomes the target for all of the frustration and blame in the family. He accepts this role because any attention is better than no attention. Billy finds a sense of family and approval in his peer group. Billy here is focused with his beer and his little bag of weed because he's a member of a gang. And these gangs, court detention, treatment centers, these are all common occurrences for Billy. He has missed learning social, emotional, and spiritual lessons. Emotionally, he's 15 because that's the age he began coping with life by using drugs and alcohol. If he is incarcerated, he will come out of prison with the hardened heart and the cynical attitude that is the hallmark of the revolving door inmate. The clown. The family clown hides pain and frustration behind a smile. He tries to diffuse serious situations with a joke or an attempt at humorous behavior. The clown and the family avoid being ignored by being entertaining, and they gain acceptance by making other people laugh. In this family, the unspoken rule is don't talk about real problems because his behavior enables the family to deny reality. His behavior is not just tolerated, but encouraged with positive attention. Jerry is the clown. He is always laughing, joking, clowning around. He's hyperactive and attention seeking. Frequently, he's sarcastic, but we all know it's just a joke. He denies reality and avoids commitment and responsibility. Jerry has learned that humor can release anger and divert attention. He avoids the family fights and tries to keep things stable and happy in the family. He is the life of the classroom and of parties. Even his teachers find it hard to discipline him because he's so cute and funny. Jerry's favorite form of humor is sarcasm and making fun of others. But this is not the humor that springs from a healthy, balanced worldview or self image. Lacking positive role models, Jerry reaches adolescence unprepared to deal with life. As an adult, Jerry will lack problem solving skills, and his commitments will be fleeting as he avoids the challenges of adulthood by laughing. The lost child. The lost child is quiet and finds acceptance by not being a problem. Their need for security and significance goes unaddressed as they are ignored in the drama and chaos of the family dysfunction. Looking for self-worth, they need they the self-worth that they need, they confuse sexual attention with love because they do not know how to draw attention to themselves by talking. They are an easy target for sexual and all other forms of abuse. While this pattern is most noticeable in the female lost child, as with all of the other patterns, this is not a gender specific role. Sissy is the lost child. Shy, passive, nonverbal, anxious, a mediocre achiever. She does not cause problems. She lives in a fantasy world and is emotionally fragile. Sissy is the lost child. She lives in a fantasy world and vows that when she has her own family, it won't be like this one. She promised herself she would never marry anyone like her dad and hopes for a knight in shining armor that will come and rescue her and take her away from all of this. But having grown up without a healthy role model, she gravitates to the familiar. One of Billy's friends came to the house one day. He told her he loved her. So naturally, she decided she loved him. Now she has a baby and another one on the way. The chameleon. This child has learned to adapt to survive. The chameleon is the role that is most frequently chosen by people when they have not done the worksheet associated with this teaching. The chameleon is actually fairly rare because there will be another role that is dominant in the person's life. We all have chameleon characteristics, but it is not our egocentric, our go-to, our MO role. A true chameleon child will do anything and be anybody to gain the acceptance and approval of whoever they are with at the moment. A poor sense of self results in feeling lost. No, not knowing who they are or what they want. High anxiety is a way of life. They will baffle adults as they have so much potential, but rarely achieve life goals because even though they may appear to try, they live for the moment and rarely think about the future or plan. A lack of impulse control will result in risk-taking and thrill-seeking behaviors. They may gravitate to dangerous people in dangerous situations. Injury or abuse are common. They may be heard to say, well, anything is better than boredom. Camille is the chameleon. She has a poor sense of self. She is impulsive, easily bored, thrill-seeking, underachieving, and approval and acceptance are her highest priorities. Because Henry's family is a good Christian family, Camille has grown up in church and she knows how to speak fluent Christianese. However, discovering at school that there were more friends to be had if you were not a Christian, she quickly moved away into the party crowd. She dropped the facade. However, if she finds herself in trouble, she knows how to put on the good girl act and does so quickly. She feels adrift in a world that she does not understand and has no coping skills or strategies for managing. Her lack of a sense of identity and self-worth makes her vulnerable and easily influenced. She may try numerous alternative lifestyles, looking for the one that fills the void that she feels on the inside. What we've described this evening is what those of you who are familiar with the Alpha series may recognize as the Solomon syndrome. However, for this teaching, I call it the origin of problems. The origin of our problems is that empty place in our soul, our lack of personal worth. As we described in earlier teachings, it is God's plan that the family will meet that need, raising children to know Him and to be able to develop a personal relationship with God that will be a sustaining source for that personal worth. However, no one can give someone else what they do not have. This need is the air supply to our soul. And we move out into the world to get that need met. This need is founded on what we call false assumptions. And that false assumption sounds like, I will be worthy if, I will have self-esteem if, everything will be okay if. Now, no one starts out filling that blank with negatives. It's always filled with good things. If I can be loved, if I can graduate from school, if I can go to college, if I can get a good job, if I can find the right person to marry, if I can live in the right place, have the right house, drive the right car, have the right amount of money, whatever it is, that seeking, that chasing after the world results in everything that we do, whether it looks good or it looks bad, is self-centered behavior. We will lie to ourselves, telling ourselves that our motives are to help people, to be kind, to be good. But then when that person does not respond in the way we need them to respond, we will flip into those death emotions. These are false goals, and if achieved, may result in a temporary satisfaction. It was my experience in my life that as long as I had these goals to chase, I had hope because I thought, well, okay, now I've got this. And even though I still feel vaguely empty, what I really need is, and I would start seeking one more thing. I reached that place in my life where I had achieved most everything that I thought should make me feel worthy. I had even gotten saved, joined a church, and was in leadership in the church. And I still felt empty. When that happens, there is no hope. The need for a personal relationship with God must be stressed and found, or the person will become cynical and frequently begin to experience somatic illnesses as a result of their repressed anger and hatred and disappointment. So, what do we need to deal with the hurting? Technically, it can be summed up as a spiritual awakening. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe the person isn't saved. They may be, but they do not have that spiritual awakening that makes the reality of their worth in their personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ a reality in their experience. Because the thoughts and beliefs that we grow up with are based on a God-given need, they are part of our reality and our truth. This makes them very difficult to question. It requires a willingness to accept a new basis for our worth, a serious commitment to do work and to ask for help. An accountability partner, mentor, sponsor, whatever title you're comfortable with, but someone who is further down the path than you are. This must be an objective person with whom we give permission to speak truth, hard truth into our life and to challenge our reality. We must believe that this person understands how we feel and has personal experience with what we are trying to do. We must actually become, as Jesus said, we must become like little children again. We must find healthy, supportive relationships that will allow us to practice our new identity and behaviors without condemnation. That is the basic teaching for the Hurten family. What we have here is a series of roles that really represent nothing except the attempt to wrestle satisfaction and happiness out of a world that was never designed by the Creator to meet our needs. It's a perfectly wonderful world, but not what we need to fill that empty place on the inside, because we are truly spiritual beings. Having that ability to end the challenge, to meet that personal relationship with God so that He can minister a lasting source of personal worth that will allow us to truly love like Christ. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. We're going to bring on the panel in a second, and we're going to tie everything together. That was fantastic. Thank you for giving us all that information and challenge and kind of in your face stuff too. One of the things that I identified with quite a bit was, just tying in the personal need for worth into all this. And I'm convinced after years of ministry, of being a husband, a father, a teacher, a pastor, counseling, helping people, that the foundation and really the root of all dysfunction, the root of all human dysfunction is the unmet needs and the misplaced dependencies. And you notice that in each one of those different ways of acting out, really the root of it all was worthlessness, not having those needs met. And it's so important to emphasize that those things are needs. They're not wants. Your personal soul for your personal need for worth is not something that, I'll do okay if I don't have it. It's like saying I'll be okay physically if I don't have air, food, water. So that's what causes all the dysfunction. And with married couples, it's the hardest thing because there's all sorts of tools out there, especially in the Christian world. There was they did the 40-day challenge for a while. They have all sorts of marriage books and marriage seminars. Up in Georgia, they do something called the Marriage Intensive. And there was the book that was written, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. There are tons of books and tons of tools of how to relate to one another and communicate. But if you don't have those basic needs met, those tools don't work. It's just like parenting. Parenting, there's lots of philosophies and tools out there, but research shows if the kids don't know two things, any kind of parenting tool or technique that you use won't work unless they know two things. I love you, and I'm in charge. When they're young, growing up, I love you, I'm in charge. Now, of course, the second part, we eventually hand over. We're not in charge as much as they grow because that doesn't really work with the teenager. You have to work yourself out of that part of the job. So parenting techniques, marriage tools, they will not work unless those basic needs are met. And I've talked to people that were highly educated, doctors, their marriage has fallen apart. And when we talk about, hey, here's your personal needs, for some reason I don't know. A lot of times they mix it up with personal issues. Oh yeah, we have to work on our personal issues of the past, the hurts, the rejections. Yeah, but you need to go on the offensive and allow God to meet those needs every day. And you could do an experiment next time you're watching, I don't know, a drama, a movie on TV. Look at the main character and ask, what are they basing their worth on? Why are they having this conflict? Why are they freaking out? And I did this with my literature students. I would go over Maslow's hierarchy, the Solomon syndrome, and we would look at the main character and say, okay, where are they trying to get their needs met? It's the human, it's universal. It's universal. And that part to me just rang all the more true, that those needs have to be met for us to function and for us to relate to one another. And, Paul said that, it's hard for the believer. It's hard for the saved to get this. How much more for the unbeliever? And the other thing that I wanted to tie in was looking at the different roles that people play. Neil Anderson wrote a book called Overcoming the Darkness, and he talked about the foundational needs that have to be met. And he said that every culture has a system. Every culture has a system that tells us how to get those needs met. And our culture is the American dream, of course. But you even look within the American culture, in high school, there's the peer culture, right? And there's a system that tells you if you're worthy. The American dream is the overarching culture. Then all over the place, we have little systems. And Neil Anderson said there's 3 responses or 4 responses to the 3 dysfunctional and 4 responses to the system. One is to beat the system. That means you're gonna do everything that the American dream tells you to do. You're gonna go full force and you're going to be the best. And that's what you're basing your worth on. But usually people come out empty. They have midlife crisis. They say that the average age that people just go into counseling for their issues is from about mid 30s to early 40s. That's because they've accomplished everything and they're still empty as a gong. So they beat the system. He said another response to the system is they rebel against the system. They say, the system's garbage. I'm not going to get caught up in the rat race. And they rebel against it. Billy the cynic, right? The one that's always in trouble. So they rebel against the system is another way. Their worth is based on how bad they can be. Their worth is on how bad they can beat the system. Their motto is, I'm going to be good at being bad. Now, some kids start out beating the system, but if they're going to be bad, if they're going to step out of that good boy, bad boy, good boy box, they're just not going to step like a foot over the box. They're going to go a mile in the other direction, that being bad. So you beat the system, you rebel against the system, and then he said there are those that sink under the system. The system's too much. They get depressed. They put too much pressure on themselves. They have a breakdown, and they get depressed, and they think, I'm worthless. I'm never going to make it. I'll never change. I'll never make it. My circumstances will never change, and they get depressed and usually run into addiction. But then we have what we have to learn to do. And Paul called it being in the world and not of it. We use the system. Neil Anderson says, that is that we know that we have a calling, say to be a doctor. But we're going to use our gifts and talents to work within that system to love other people. We know who we are. We self-actualize. We're getting our needs met by Christ. But since we have to love other people, we find out what our gifts and callings are. And in that, we love other people. And I saw this just as I was reading this book. God gave me a great illustration. We had a family pediatrician, well known on the Treasure Coast, Dr. Simpson. All of our kids. He was retiring just as Grace was around 4 or 5, but he saw all our kids, and he was a believer, and he just loved it. Just, you could tell he was doing it, and he would say to Grace or Sarah Hilly, "Oh, Pumpkin, what's wrong?" And he'd, check them out. He'd really take his time with them. Well, he had an understudy or whatever, a guy that was going to take his place when he retired, and I don't think he had much control over it. And the guy's bedside matter was horrible. You could tell that he was doing it to make himself worthy and to get the money. I know I'm judging him, but that's just the way it came across to me, that we had 2 doctors. One, you could feel the love, and the other was like, I don't know if this guy really cares about me or not. So they're both doing the same thing, but one, the system. One's using the system, right? One is functioning within the system, being in the world and not of it. So that's where we have to be. We have to be receivers of God's love, givers of God's love, but not takers. So that's all I have to say about that. I never have an eloquent ending, more like Forrest Gump. And Priya, will start with you on adding your 20 cents. 20
cents, huh? Well, thanks again for having me. I'm always thrilled to be part of this panel. I always learn so much. Pam, thank you. For me, I can certainly identify with the Martha role. I love what you guys are reiterating, is that, we fall into these roles because we are so desperate to fulfill that need for worth. And if we're not told that God meets those needs, or we're not getting them through the family, we're going to fall somewhere in this. And so for me, I was definitely the overachiever, overly responsible. My love was equated with what I was doing, my performance. And I really liked what Bill said in terms of, how these roles kind of translate into trying to achieve the American dream or not. And so for me, I definitely got to that place where I beat the system. I had the husband, the house, the cars, all of that, and everything just kind of fell apart because I still was empty on the inside. And so for me, I was really thankful that I did hit that rock bottom place, because it did give me an opportunity to start truly spiritually seeking and finding out what my soul really needed. And when I did come across Alpha Ministries and the Alpha series, and really understanding that my entire life's motivation was to feel worthy and that those needs could only be met by God, everything changes. And like you said, Bill, when your motives change, everything changes. And so me being a physical therapist, I could truly be present for my patients, and it wasn't about me anymore. I could truly love that person and walk with them in whatever struggles they were going through, and really and truly enjoy the process, and just be amazed every day that I got to be part of the miracle. So what a joy, what a joy to know God, to do the work of the ministry, and to really and truly get your needs met from where they're supposed to be met, which is through our Heavenly Father. So again, thanks again. I always love being here. So that's all I got to say. 20 cents.
Yeah. Yeah. that was more than that. It's worth its weight in gold. Thank you for that. And it's true, because when you're in a way, you're ministering to people's physical needs, right? And you probably can talk to them about their personal needs as well.
Absolutely, because the root of a lot of, and you even mentioned it, Pam, that when we're not having that personal relationship with God, people are developing somatic symptoms. And I see it over and over again, where back pain, neck pain, they have emotional and spiritual pieces to it. And so for me to be able to even introduce that to a patient, to be able to say, hey, listen, I think this is coming from a place of stress. And then I can actually talk about, one of our tools, 12 steps, Alpha series, whatever. But point is that I can at least, that door is open for me to even speak to that, because they're hurting and pain is a great motivator, and they're coming to me, and I can at least say, hey, listen, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that, or what's changed in your life? And they're hearing me, they're receiving it. And so again, what a privilege I have to be able to share that spiritual, emotional piece with in conjunction with their physical pain. So it's pretty neat to see how God is using me in his plan. So
yeah, I like that tie-in with the physical, because my brother's a chiropractor, and one of my friends was on the table, and I was in the office with them, and my brother has this term, and he told my friend, you got to let the bear out, man. You got to let the bear out. He goes, what do you mean? And he said, I guarantee you're holding anger and resentment. And he said, yeah, I am.
Right. I mean, oftentimes I'll actually recommend, journaling. And everyone looks at me like I'm kind of weird, but I'm like, hey, listen, it's pretty apparent to me that you're holding this stuff. And that's usually part of my questions, like, well, what's changed in your life? How are you dealing with your stress? Like, what are you doing? And oftentimes it's denial. I watch TV, it's nobody deals with anything. Everybody, again, the common MO, if you don't know the Lord, is denial. So, again, it gives me an opportunity every time to be able to speak to that. So, and like I said, they're willing to hear. So, I have a captive audience. So
yes, you do. It's kind of like being a barber too.
It is. So again,
all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chaplain Mike.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me be a part of this panel. I was looking at the family, and I was thinking about my family of origin, and I was the scapegoat and the clown back then, but that's many, many years ago. And then as I started to have a family, I was definitely, the Henry, the intimidator and everything. But I was thinking about all these points that we can make on here. We, give it so many points for this, that, and the other, and I've got points on every one of them. And I was thinking about it, BC and AC, before Christ, after Christ in my life. But even after I came to Christ, I had no clue who I was, what God had done for me. And like I said, only in so many years ago, I came to the conclusion that Christ is all that I need, everything that I need. I'm complete in Him. And I love my life now. And I'm so glad, Bill, that I'm not raising kids and even have teenagers. My heart goes out to you, bro. But I screwed that up royally. I mean, my kids, they were looking at this thing here and said, "Oh yeah, Carmen's the clown, and I was the scapegoat," and all. So my kids identify with this Hurten family because I heard a lot of them, and but we all have to own our own junk on that, and that's under the blood, so to speak. But now my job is to love those kids unconditionally. And when God gives me the opportunity to speak truth into their life. And I find that just awesome. And I've said for many years now that God can restore the years that the locusts have eaten. I mean, man, I had all kind of pestilence in my life. And I was a preacher for years, But I tell people I wasn't a pastor, I was a pester. I pestered a lot of people. But it's all good now. I thank God, and I think, okay, God, what else do you want me to do? And I take it a day at a time. I don't stress out anything. My mantra is, if it don't flow, I don't go, and just try to take it a day at a time and let God have His way. And I get the privilege to be Jesus to so many people and let Him do it through me. I can't do it. No way. And I think a lot of times we forget who we really are. And when we forget who we really are, then we get in that flesh thing. We start resort back to old ways of doing things. And so, but thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I hope, we've got a decent audience, or at least it'll be on tape that others can see it. But thank you again, and I appreciate it for inviting me to the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your candor, and I see you with your kids on Facebook, and they look like they love their daddy too. So that's good. God does. We can never ruin His plan, and it's never too late to practice that love in one another. I like that Pam put in. She used the word practice, because the best we can do is practice loving one another. And I find that I revert back, as you said about reverting back. Applying the gospel and loving others, especially in parenting, takes a lot of time and patience. And you can get things much faster. You can get faster results. I used to get fast results if I banged my fist on the table and the veins popped out of my head next to my liver spots on my head and got mad. They would do exactly what I wanted them to right then and there, but not on the inside. Man's anger does not produce the righteous life that God requires, James said, but it's faster, and we live in an instant culture. And as we all can attest, God, spiritual growth is a process, and that what Pam put up at the end, that we have to have this spiritual awakening, and Christ is changing those patterns, because I see my MO, and I see how much God has chiseled off of it now. And I stand amazed at that. Dave's shaking his head, so we're going to hear from Dave. He's relating to it all. Dave, how you doing tonight?
Doing very good. I just want to thank Pam for putting this together, and her energy associated with it, because it is a very good teaching, and to help identify how we coped, and in my case, how I coped with life before Christ, as somebody put, before Christ and after Christ. didn't have Christ in my life. This is how I coped in my family. I was the clown. I also had a lot of sarcasm, but I was the clown, and also lost, very lost. And so this teaching helped me to see my MO, what I use, and I still have tainted with a little bit of that because it's also part of my personality. But to be able to discern the difference between personality and MO, what defines that is learning what we all have shared tonight, which is our identity, what we learned through the teaching of the Alpha series and who God really made us to be, and the fact that we are worthy and we're loved and we're accepted. Though that was very profound to me, and it still is very profound daily, that he meets my needs, my physical needs, my personal needs. And then the ability to love others, because as we've talked about, all of us have said tonight, we can't give what we ain't got. If we haven't got an identity and we don't have any love coming flowing in us because we know we're loved, and how are we going to love somebody else? We're going to do the outward actions maybe, but the real love is not there unless we've received it. So this teaching that Pam does so wonderfully helps to identify our MO, the MO that we used before Christ, the MO we used even when we were saved, but and again, it kind of intertwines with the personality as well. So it's the only one that can discern that or break that down is our relationship with Christ, being able to see what's beneficial and what's just the trying to get our own needs met through our defiance or whatever. But I'm very glad I was a part of this teaching, and thank you all very much. That's my 2 cents.
All right, we're rich tonight. Thank you, Dave. I think one of the other things that I noticed tonight too was tying it into the personal needs and really seeing that God tempers. He tempers us. He's changing us from the inside out, and the roles that we identify with, we can easily slip back into. But God has given us a new role. He's given us a new identity. He's given it all to us. And I noticed one other thing. I noticed that when my brother was kind of looking at this, and he was identifying that he was the clown, and then he became the scapegoat. I remember one night we were all sitting around. It was only a couple of years ago. And for some reason, my brother got into, and this is for the parents out there, my brother got into some kind of like true confession time with the family. It was my brother and sister and my mom and dad. And he talked about some of the wild things that he did. They knew a lot, but they didn't know this much. And then my sister, she threw out a couple things. And for some reason, I was quiet. And it's well known that I'm my mom's favorite. I kind of got knocked out of that with my brother's son, her grandson, Nathaniel. I think but I was the favorite. That was a well-known thing. So when my brother and sister are saying all this, my mom says, "Oh, well, not my Billy. He didn't do anything like that." And my brother and sister started laughing. And she said, and everyone's still in the town I grew up in. I'm the only one that left. And they laughed, and they said, "You go into any store where there's classmates or anywhere where there's Billy's classmates, and they'll say, 'Your brother, your son, he was a lunatic. He was a lunatic.'" So I was kind of like the clown, the crazy guy, the thrill seeker type thing. So that was my role. And I still tend to clown around a bit. So that's it. But for the parents, here's what happened. My mom says, "What did I do wrong? Like, you kids were nuts. What you kids did all that stuff. What did I do wrong?" And my brother said, "Mom," he sat right up. He said, "Mom, it's everything that you did right that we had something to come back to. We had a foundation to come back to. It's the things that you did right that we got through that period, right? We got through that period. I think, Pam, we're wrapping this up tonight. Pam's going to make some final comments about all this, and then we'll give you a little preview of coming attractions. Pam, what do you got coming?
Thanks, Bill. I just wanted to piggyback for a minute on what the panel was saying. In my experience, I had this idea when I started this journey that recovery meant I would stop doing this stuff. And as Mike alluded to so beautifully, what I know now is that recovery is not that I stop doing these things. I have a personality, I have a style, and that's going to stay. It's part of my flesh. Recovery, I have discovered, is that not that I do it always right, but that when I find myself in conflict, in problems, in trouble, I can use, and for example, this teaching and the things that I've learned and all the other stuff that was mentioned tonight, to say, no, the problem is not somebody else. The problem is me. And that is not for the purpose of beating myself up, because remember, I'm Martha. I'm the big responsible. I feel my security and significance by being responsible for everything. It's me. But no, that gives me the opportunity and the tools to go to God and say, Papa, please help me. Help me. Relieve me of the difficulties that are standing in the way of my usefulness to you. Relieve me of the bondage of self. These are things that I can confess specifically today and help me to not just dissolve and blow. My grandmother said to me when she said, Pam, have you ever considered just blowing up one part of your life at a time? That was my MO. I would just drop an atomic. I don't do that anymore. Now, do I sometimes blow up a part? Yes, I do. But I know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I have tools and a support system to help hold me so that I don't, number one, don't do something that'll make it worse, trying to make myself feel better, and to make progress, to use it as a learning experience to help, first of all, myself, and then to help someone else. Thanks.
Bill, we can't hear you.
Unmute, Bill.
Oh, now you can hear me. There you go. So one of the things that we could do, I like that you were saying that, Pam, that's not like what you stopped doing. What I was starting to think about is the best defense is a good offense. That if we focus on that, we have now this potential and this treasure in an earthen vessel, and we can actually go and love other people. We can go love other people. Go be who you are, and then God will take care of the rest. He's changing us from the inside out. I want to thank everybody again for joining, contributing, fellowshipping, sharing. Hopefully we've helped and encouraged others and informed others and build others up and strengthen them in the faith. Next week, we're going to start another series on spiritual warfare. And it's not that when we think of spiritual warfare, it's not that Jesus and God are in some kind. I hate that arm wrestling meme people put out there, like Jesus and the devil are in arm wrestling to see who's going to win. Jesus is, the victory has already been won. So we're going to go into spiritual warfare, and guess where it mostly takes place? In the mind. Faith is a cognitive. So we'll be back next week with that. Sundays, Alpha Ministries is meeting regular time, 11 a.m. I think this Tuesday, John's going to start connecting the dots, but check the webpage for that. I'm pretty sure he said he'll probably be ready this week, if not the next week. He's going to do a series called Connecting the Dots. So we'll be here on Tuesdays and Thursdays as usual. And for those who Reach Community Church, it's Causeway Cove this week. And we spent some time last week building their new home, which is going to be outdoors and free, which is good. So again, thank you, everybody. If you have questions, comments, get in touch with us through our page, through the Alpha Ministries webpage. Alpha Ministries Facebook has a messenger. Their webpage has a way to contact. Get in touch. We're all, I think, I don't know about David, but I know Mike's on Facebook. Priya, you on Facebook? Pam's on. We all have our personal pages, and then we have Alpha Ministries page, and you can get in touch with us, any of those pages if you need anything. If you want any of the material that we have, get in touch. So be encouraged. Go love one another. Read John's newsletter about doing everything without complaining and grumbling. And let's get on with loving one another. Practice, practice, practice. Amen. Good night, and thank you.
Thank you, Bill.